After some of the changes to ship prices in Star Citizen's 3.23 patch, I thought it'd be cool to check in with one of the game's OG all-rounders, the RSI Constellation. And I'm interested to shine a spotlight on a ship that can cover as much of the game on offer as possible in a single package. Theoretically meaning, anathema as it may be in a game where people talk about their fleet a lot, that we could live with just one ship in our hangars. So if this sounds good to you, then grab a cup of tea while I roll the intro, then let's get into it. In this video, I'm going to talk a bit about my choice of ship, and then put it through its paces, seeing how it performs in a variety of scenarios. But before we get too far into the weeds, I want to dive into why I think it matters. Why, in a game with no end of specialist ships, would we seek out a generalist, jack of all trades? Why choose a Swiss Army knife when you have so many dedicated tools on offer? Well, the first reason is the economic changes that I highlighted in the intro. Ship prices in-game have had a huge overhaul and have ended up significantly higher than they were pre-3.23. And this isn't the final destination, it more indicates the direction of travel. So quite simply, your credits aren't going to go as far as they once did. For some players who have loads of time to sink into the game, this isn't going to make much of a difference. It will take longer to put together a fleet of specialist ships for every conceivable purpose, but they'll get there in the end. But others don't necessarily have many hours to play a day, and just pop in for a session once or twice a week. I think the value of a single ship that can cover a lot of gameplay over one that focuses on just one aspect of the game could therefore make a lot of sense for those people in particular. And secondly is an element of future-proofing. StarCit right now lacks much in the way of cash sinks, but make no mistake, they're inbound. I would expect to see costs connected to ships, hull insurance is the obvious one, and for many people will be covered by LTI or extended insurance sold with their ship. But on top of this, I wouldn't be surprised to see components, insurance, hangar fees, maintenance costs, etc. And for a fleet, these costs could rack up a lot quicker than with a single vessel. And as the game expands to more larger star systems, versatility may be an advantage over specialization. If you venture out into a system like Pyro, you might find yourself dealing with the unexpected and having to adapt on the fly. And if you can't, then you might find yourself missing out on opportunities, or wasting a lot of time going back and forth to far distant space stations just to switch over a ship. So with all this in mind, I wanted to take a look at one of the original multi-role vessels, the RSI Constellation. When I first started looking at StarCit, I consumed a lot of videos on the official channel, and one that really stood out to me and sold me on the dream of the game was the Constellation Aquila trailer. For me, the idea of a ship where you could hang out with your crewmates and go explore alien worlds was exactly the sort of sci-fi dream I wanted to play out. And in the Connie family, we've got 4 variants to choose from, each with their advantages and disadvantages. Up first, the most cost-effective of the bunch at just over 8 million credits is the Taurus. This is the cargo variant which trades the snub fighter that we'll find on all the other ships in the line for extra hauling capacity, and at 174 SEU it's got the largest grid of the lot. All of the Connies have 2 turrets, above and below the main bridge. The Taurus exchanges guns on the bottom turret for a really handy tractor beam, and I have to say that of all the ship-mounted tractor beams we've got so far, this is actually one of the most useful, since the design allows you to easily move stuff in and out of your cargo bay. Up next, we've got the flagship variant, the Constellation Andromeda, which will set you back 10.2 million creds. Described as a cargo/gunship, this is the original Swiss Army knife. At 96 SEU, the Andromeda loses some grid space versus the Taurus, but it's still pretty decent, and it keeps the attached snub, a P-52 Merlin from Kruger. Both turrets are guns on this variant, each having dual size 2 mounts. And as well as the 4 pilot-controlled size 5 hardpoints common to all constellations, the Andromeda also has a metric ton of missiles, packing 24 size 2s and 28 size 1s. The Connie Aquila is the exploration variant, and while it's undoubtedly an interesting ship for the future, and was the one I mentioned as capturing my imagination in the beginning, it's arguably the least suitable variant for right now. It maintains the same cargo capacity as the Andromeda, but sacrifices on missiles, losing the size 1s from its arsenal. And the upper turret on this version is a dedicated scanning array, which until we get some form of scanning rework in the future, doesn't actually do anything. So considering the Aquila prices at a premium versus the Andromeda at 12.2 million, you're essentially paying more for less in the current version of the game. And finally for the lineup, we've got the luxury variant, the Phoenix. At 14.8 million, this is the most expensive variant with the added luxury tax. Similarly to the Andromeda, the Phoenix has 2 gun turrets, and it maintains the same 96 SU of cargo. But it sacrifices the size 2 missiles in this case to make way for a complete revamp of the living quarters. I have to admit, the Phoenix is my go-to luxury ship. I use it a lot more than the Origin options like the 890 Jump and the 600i when we have all get-togethers. And given that I want to spend my time essentially living out of my ship in this video, I was tempted by the generally nicer interior. I do have to say, the living arrangements in the other Connies are one of the areas these do feel like older ship designs versus some of the newer concepts. However, overall, I think the near 50% price difference is hard to justify given my objectives. So ultimately, my choice came down to the Andromeda or the Taurus, and just on balance, I decided I could live without the convenience of that pickup in cargo in order to keep the snubcraft and get that extra gun turret for when I crewed up with my mates. So with my selection of the Andromeda, it was time to head up to Port Tressler and make some upgrades along with a wee bit of personalisation. So let's start by taking a look at the loadout I'm going to go with. In terms of components, I'm going with a full mil-spec A build. An FR86 shield, 2 JS400 power plants, 2 avalanche coolers and an XL1 quantum drive to eat up big distances quickly. On the weapons side of things, I'm switching the size 2 missiles out for Rattler cluster missiles, mostly because I just love how they look, and I'm going to switch the stock Galderine laser repeaters for a full set of size 5 Omnisky 15 laser cannons. Laser cannons appear to be the meta for PvE this patch, with their high alpha damage. I opted for the Omniskys over the M7As, since they do have a faster projectile speed at 1.6 km per second versus the 1 km per second of the M series. They don't hit quite as hard, but with a combined 2432 alpha strike if all 4 hit at the same time, I reckon we're going to be okay. Similarly, I switched the repeaters on the turrets out for size 2 Omnisky 6s. I also decided to give the ship a little flourish with a paint. I'm liking the white Heron at the moment. There's an added touch, since as I mentioned, Connie interiors leave a little bit to be desired. Let's just spruce things up with a plushie, a jar of biscuits, and maybe a little houseplant. This is my Connie, there are many like it, but this one is mine. So now that we've selected our ship and we're kitted out and ready to go, I want to take a look at a few of the core game loops in SC, and how we might get the most out of this Connie. And since we're already in Microtech, I figured why not kick things off with a bit of trading. The 96 SCU of cargo capacity on the Andromeda is definitely towards the lower end of what I would consider using for haulage, but it can certainly work, and it's a meaningful enough jump from the likes of the Cutlass Black, C1 or Freelancer to make for some worthwhile trade runs. In particular, you can take advantage of certain commodities which, while higher value, have relatively small inventories. So while in my C2 with its 696 SCU of cargo I'd never bother to do a gold run, I decided to just risk it in the Connie. I'm heading down to Shubin Mining Facility SMO18 on Microtech itself to see if I can stock up on a full cargo hold. Usually I'd be pretty worried about being pirate bait at this station, but I hear they're all busy with the dupers and the RMC trade. And luckily enough, I only had to wait for one tick, which took about a minute from when I arrived, for there to be full stock. Obviously if I was trying to fill anything bigger than this wouldn't be enough, but it was perfect for my 96 SCU. So stocking up on a full load of gold set me back a smidge under 568k. Now I wouldn't usually drop the cargo hold in these situations, but the sky was clear, and I think it's always worth just taking a look whenever you get into a different ship to see how your boxes naturally stack up. So the Andromeda's grid is 4 wide, 8 long and 3 high, meaning we can move the larger 32 SCU boxes if we need to. So then it's just a hop, skip and a jump over to New Babbage to sell up, and normally I'd use the commons entrance to speed my run up a bit, but at this point I was actually just logging out for the night, so I stopped at the spaceport. A quick train ride and jog into the TDD, and the cargo sold for 718k, netting me a tidy profit of 150k on a run that took a little under 15 minutes. Now I'm not going to disingenuously extrapolate that, you're not always going to turn up right on the time of the tick, and there could always be someone else hovering over that buy button who beats you to it. But still, if you focus those higher value commodities, I think 300 to 400k an hour trading should be more than possible. So with a tricky trade run under our belt, I'm going to set course for Hurston to carry on with a bit of mining. Now unlike in games like Elite Dangerous, we can't just slap a mining laser on the Connie and make it into a mining ship, but we can use the cargo hold to transport a rock mining buggy, and to be honest, rock mining is currently in a spot where I find it really enjoyable. While it's a take that's proven quite controversial with the miners in my org at least, I am a genuine enjoyer and promoter of the Craycat ROC-DS mining buggy, which I was quite happy to see just about fits in the Connie's cargo bay. I'll be honest here, my preferred rock carrier is either the Valkyrie when I'm using the ROC-DS, or my Cutlass Black when I'm using a standard rock. And compared to these two with their strong VTOLs and smaller landing profiles, the Connie wasn't quite as easy to handle on the search for gems down on aerial. However, it still did a perfectly fine job. And since as of the last few patches gem deposits tend to spawn in larger numbers, you don't need to actually locate as many spawns to make decent bank. The larger version of the ROC has a larger cargo hold at 3.6 SEU versus the standard ROC's 0.8 SEU, and a slightly more powerful laser, which means that if you position it right, you can really limit the amount you have to move around, also lessening the impact of having separate seats for driving and mining. I also just much prefer the HUD on the DS, which I think is a lot clearer than on the standard version. So I popped in an hour-and-a-half session in the ROC, and focusing purely on Had a Night on aerial, came out of it with 1,145 gems, which netted me just shy of 320k. This type of mining obviously lacks the depth of some of the ship-based stuff, with all the modules, lasers and gadgets, but it's still a very satisfying loop, and it comes with the benefit of getting paid cash in hand at the end of your session. But now it's time to move on, because I think we need to do something a bit more combat oriented. And since I'm here at the mining outpost already, it makes sense to switch over my utility vehicle to one of the new RSI Ursa medevacs, or NERSA as the community seems to have settled on. Now obviously the NERSA is currently only available to buy for cash, so I have just invested a little bit of my store credit in one for this video. But I'd expect in a couple of patches time that's going to make its way into the ship shops, and since it's a ground vehicle it's really not likely to be very expensive in credits. The NERSA gives you a tier 3 medbed in a package small enough to fit on board a lot of different ships. And with the changes made recently to respawning, meaning that even a tier 3 bed will allow you to set your spawn point, this is all of a sudden a very powerful piece of kit. As a little tangent, I don't 100% agree that this is a good change for the game. CIG have said it's to ease some of the pain of dying, which I do appreciate can be a big annoyance. But I think the lack of easily available respawns did encourage people to seek out medical assistance when they got downed, providing gameplay for those people who enjoy a bit of first responder action. I'm a bit torn though, because another loop I really enjoy is racing, and as I said when I made my racing video recently, not everyone's lucky enough to be able to buy an 890 jump or a Carrack in game to serve as their mobile respawn point for things like that. Long term, I'd imagine we'll see more balancing around medical gameplay and respawns in particular. Probably with some form of resource that limits the potential to just come back from the dead over and over again, providing an incentive to use larger dedicated medical ships for their intended purpose. However, tangents aside, being able to essentially turn my Connie into a Connie Red does make grinding out FPS missions like bunkers a lot more forgiving. It increases the versatility that we've been looking for throughout this video. Connie also has plenty of internal space and nooks and crannies for boxes if you want to go full loot goblin mode. That said, this is one of the moments where I wondered if I should have maybe taken the Taurus instead of the Andromeda, since it would have had the grid space for boxes as well as the NERSA. During this run, I decided to call in some support from the org and hit up one of the new distribution center missions. In this one the DC was hostile, so we had to land a little bit further out and drive to our destination in the NERSA. Admittedly, not everything went to plan, and some high quality Star Citizen bugs got us along the way and took down our mobile respawn point. But then we did get to enjoy honestly some of the best FPS I've personally experienced in SC. The locations are fantastic and the AI was responding really well, making this a really engaging fight as we shot our way through security into the centre. It was all a little bit anticlimactic at the end, as after fighting our way through dozens of halls full of bad guys, we found that the Destroy Narcotics mission was bugged and we had to abandon it. But thankfully we found another Ursa on our way out and we managed to make it back to the Connie. SC is of course still very much in alpha, and it should always come with the warning that it's not for everyone, with a certain level of jankiness just to be expected. But playing with friends really does help when it all goes to the wall, and you can just have a bit of a laugh about it. So if you would like to get involved with any multi-crew stuff, please do feel free to hop into our Discord, the link's just in the video description down below. So since we already had the crew together, we decided finally to go and tackle a bit of space combat, to see how the Connie stood up to some old-fashioned pew-pew action. And safe to say, it did not disappoint in this regard. Even against some of the harder levels of PvE bounty hunting with VHRTs and ERTs, its equipment of laser cannons and missiles made pretty short work of the enemies. And the mix of weapon sizes between the pilot's size 5s and the turreted size 2s means you're well set up to handle big and small targets. If you've got the full crew of a pilot, a co-pilot to operate the missiles, 2 turret gunners and the snubcraft, then the Connie offers decent gameplay for 5 people. But it can also offer a decent experience solo or in a pair or smaller group. Compared to something like a more specialised fighter, you get the added benefit of a cargo hold too. So assuming you got rid of any vehicles in there, you've got plenty of space internally to store any of the particularly good cargo you find on board some of the dead bounties. The drop rates of super valuable stuff have been notably tuned down, so 96 SU is actually perfectly fine if you want to pick up a few boxes here and there. If you focus on the higher value stuff like Quantanium at 25k per SU, you can stack up a decent bonus for your crew. So there we have it for the video, but even after this I think I'm going to be sticking with this particular Constellation Andromeda as my daily driver for most of the 323 patch. I've always valued variety, and being able to access so much of the game from a single ship is just really cool. And I think this is something I actually crave in Star Citizen, and look forward to seeing more of in the future. Because one of the coolest things about all kinds of sci-fi that I've watched or read, from Star Wars to The Expanse, was that the crew and the ship were all kind of bonded in a way. It wasn't a case of, oh, we'll go and drop off the Millennium Falcon and go get something a bit better for this next job. You sort of stuck with your ship, regardless of whether it was the best thing or the worst thing for the job. If you enjoyed this and you think I've earned it, then please do consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons. We recently got over 25,000 subs, and it really hasn't failed to amaze me at any point the amount of support that I've received on this channel. And please do let me know what you think down in the comments below, because the Connie is not the only potential all-rounder, so I'd be interested to read what your favourites are. And obviously we've missed some things, we haven't gone racing, we haven't gone and done some Copian hunting, so let us know what you get up to. But with all that said, thank you very much for watching all the way to the end, and I look forward to seeing you next time.